Okay, hi there. I'm Kenzie Converse. I'm a born and raised local here in Leavenworth, Washington. I'm an online student pursuing a degree in audio production and engineering with the goal to celebrate and promote diversity through live music and arts. I involve myself occasionally in local civic movements to help strengthen our community in hopes that we can do better for all families, minorities, and residents here in Central Washington. One of the ways I like to do that is through promoting the right to vote and making information about voting and candidates easier to understand and more available so more people can participate more actively. So this event is brought to you by the North Central Washington Libraries, partnering with North Central Washington Young Voters. And North Central Washington Young Voters is comprised of young and professional individuals with a passion for civic rights and equality. And so we have a few of them here tonight to answer some frequently asked questions about voting. So these panelists will be speaking a little bit about their individual journeys with civic engagement. And we'll also be discussing the direct impact voting has on our communities and how we as young residents can channel our passions into action. It's hard as the youth of today's America to distinguish our roles in the political sphere. There's also the looming question of whether or not our voice is being heard or even can be heard. But that's exactly why this event exists tonight. The purpose is to help young eligible voters gain confidence to increase voter participation. So welcome to those of you who are joining us now and those who are watching this later. We're going to go ahead and ask these panelists some questions and then leave some time to answer any questions that you might have. If you have any questions, you can submit them during this event or comment on the Facebook video on the NCW Libraries Facebook page. So I'll give the floor to the panelists for some intros. Alex, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, my name is Alex Romero. I am originally from Oregon. I graduated from the University of Oregon with a bachelor's in computer science, in political science. I went to Seattle University School of Law and got my Juris Doctor. I'm an attorney. I practice immigration law at a local nonprofit, not even a local nonprofit, it's just a nonprofit, called the Northwest Immigrants' Rights Project. I focus on providing direct legal representation for undocumented kids, and that my work brings me to North Central Washington. I got involved in voting and in civil engagement by registering people to vote in my undergrad. I was part of the Oregon Student Association's vote campaigns, and so I just canvassed a lot and went to classrooms to make sure that everyone had their address updated and make sure that everyone was registered to vote. So that's my my initial engagement. I was going to say entanglement. Initial engagement with civil engagement, and so that's where I come from. Understanding that these, I think the question was brought up of why young people don't vote, and just understanding that since there's a lot of systems to keep people from voting, right? Because that the systems maintain themselves and uphold themselves by us being disenfranchised as young people, disenfranchised from voting, right? And to change certain systems, and in order to preserve the status quo.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you. Donnie, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, or by whenever you see this, good day. My name is Donnie Guerrero. I am the Community Engagement Specialist for Molina. So it is a free Medicaid insurance company in Washington State. I also serve on the board for the local YWCA of North Central Washington. They have a beautiful mission to go ahead and support women and children that are often left behind in the community, and we want to make sure that they are empowered and taken care of. I am currently also a co-chair for the Latinx advisory group for the local Chelan Douglas Health District. And a lot of the work that I do every day in and out is serving a lot of the vulnerable, disenfranchised community members. So this is where a lot of my work comes in, to make sure that I am not only understanding what is affecting me, but also the communities that we serve, and making sure that whenever possible, I am advocating for them. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Steph, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name's Steph Jordan. I'm originally from Massachusetts, and I'm out here working on a local state representative campaign, Adrian Moore, running for representative of the 12th Legislative District. And I graduated with a degree in computer science and philosophy, and I'm really passionate about the intersection of technology and social justice, and working for a startup that aims to kind of revolutionize how we perceive information and internalize information and leverage some of the ubiquitous information economy that is always at our fingertips for social action and involvement, rather than just apathy and resignation. So I'm really passionate about how we can use all of the tools and mediums that are parts of our lives to promote equality and social justice, rather than just reinforcing the status quo, as Alex said. And I'm also here to promote everybody getting involved in their own way, because I think that local politics is a really important thing in terms of its influence on people's lives on the ground.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you. Isabella, you want to go next?
Yes. Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Isabella Rodriguez. I was a Running Start student here at Wenatchee Valley College. Then I went on to the University of Washington, where I got my degree in history and diversity, and I studied that as a knowledge base to hopefully enter into politics someday. I also am going to this is my first time voting in a federal election in November. So for me, this is my first time, and I think it's really important to talk to younger voters that are around my age, that it's also their first time voting, to help educate them and to help show them the importance of voting.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. We're going to go kick off with this first question. Alex, I know you touched on this a little bit already. But why do you think many young people don't vote?
Yeah, so I think it's really, I don't think it's a coincidence that younger people don't vote as much as older people, or that white people vote much more than people of color, right? I think there's a lot of different factors to consider, whether disenfranchisement or frustration or hopelessness. But I think it's a conditioning. I think the way the political system is set up is that it maintains itself and upholds itself by conditioning certain people, certain marginalized people, young people, that their voice really doesn't matter and that they're not experts in these fields. Therefore, they don't have a valid way of changing these systems, right? And I think really acknowledging that is one of the first steps in changing that reality, right? Because if you don't, essentially, let's go with that.
Yeah. Thank you, Donnie, sorry.
No problem. So I will go ahead and speak maybe from more of a personal level. So in the household that I grew up in, it was not something that was instilled from my parents. And I personally believe it is because a lot of the information about voting was not provided in the language that is familiar to them, or it was not portrayed in writing or in any kind of context where it is deliverable to that community in specific. So with them not being engaged in that manner, they were not able to pass those instillments on to me and my siblings. So we were not engaged. And until recently, in the last probably when Barack Obama was in office, that was probably about when I went ahead and became more engaged in political views and started educating myself. And that's when we as a family began having those bigger conversations with our parents, and we got them involved as well. One other thing that I'll go ahead and add is that I've in a handful of different occasions, I have gone ahead and participated before COVID in some meetings with my local Democratic like-minded individuals. But I was only a small fraction of the youth in the room. And so a lot of that information was not geared towards me. I myself am more of a hands-on individual. And for those people that are not hands-on, for me personally, it was really hard to go ahead and understand and become more active. So I think it's getting better now, but that's where I feel why youth are not as engaged as they could be.
Totally. Isabella, what do you think?
I think many people who have the privilege to vote, a lot of them have the privilege to not pay attention to politics because it doesn't affect them. And I think that's important to add to this conversation. I also think there's a lot of miseducation or no education around voting. I did Running Start here at 16, and when I attended college, I was met with a lot of political discourse that would not have occurred in high school. I learned about voting at a very young age. I learned about the importance of it at a very young age, but that was also through college, which was a privilege for me to be in the Running Start program. And so that was, for me, a source for me to get education. But I know a lot of my peers and a lot of people my age didn't have that same educational route, definitely view voting differently. And I also think it's important to add that it's not only on young voters. I know plenty of people in the older generation, even upwards to their 40s, that feel like their vote isn't important or it doesn't count or it doesn't make a difference as well. So I don't think it's just on young voters.
Totally. Okay, cool. Moving on to the next question. And just a little reminder, we're trying to limit it to 5 minutes per question. And you're all four more than welcome to turn your microphones on so it can be a conversation. And so the next question is, how do I get started and how do I register? Like if you're talking to someone that's starting from square one, has never voted before and doesn't really know where to go, what do you think? What do you say?
So you can definitely register to vote online pretty easily. I can drop the link in the chat box, and we can also comment it on the Facebook live stream so that it's accessible to everyone. I can also just say it because it's super simple right here, www.voter.votewa.gov. And that'll bring you right there. And that should be the most simple online way to do it, which is pretty straightforward. Although I know everybody doesn't have access to the internet. So there are voter registration drives happening across the district. There should be more of them. But Cafe in Wenatchee is doing voter registration drives most Saturdays. And we can message also in the chat the address of that so you can go and register in person there. Anyone else have anything to add?
I think even on social media right now, you can open up Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, even TikTok, and you can register to vote on there. There's many celebrities that are posting about the importance to vote and how to register and talking about how to register in your state. And I don't know because of COVID right now, but even on the day of in November, you can still go to the courthouse and get your ballot even the day of, as long as it's turned in before 8 p.m. on November 3rd.
So there are plenty of resources, and I love that there are so many resources just in this room. That's phenomenal. And like Steph went ahead and mentioned already, so Cafe. But if anybody has ever applied for free Medicaid, so there are institutions in town that will go ahead and offer that. But part of that process is also to go ahead and get you to register to vote, so they can help you through that process, and they already have that set up. Also, you can also reach out to the local Democratic office or Republican, if anybody Republican is watching tonight or whenever this is also, I'm sure that they will have those resources to go ahead and get you signed up either by paper ballot or online. So
awesome. I also, for people in Leavenworth, Cashmere, Wenatchee area, I register voters and can do so online and in person. I have English and Spanish forms. So Kenzie Converse on Facebook, you can find me, message me, whatever. Anything else to add? Awesome. All right. Lots of resources there. So here's another question. How do I know my ballot was counted and not stolen? How do I check to make sure my vote has been counted?
So probably the easiest way that I have found for myself, it was just finding my local elections office. And obviously during COVID this year, it probably would be a lot safer just to do it online, since I think a lot of those offices are closed to the public. But like, for instance, if you are living in Chelan County like I am, I would just type in or do a quick Google for Chelan County, Washington elections office. It'll go ahead and bring up their page. And when you go ahead and either drop your ballot in the box or send it through the mail, give it a day or two for it to go ahead and get to its destination. And if it arrives safely, it'll go ahead and let you know that it has been counted right on there.
Also, to add to that, something I just recently found out is your vote is actually public information, not who you voted for, but whether or not you voted. So if you sign up to vote and you vote, that is public information on whether or not you voted or not.
Wow. Okay. That's really valid information. Thank you. Any others on that one?
It looks like one of our guests has asked, where do you find that information? Bella, I don't know if you want to field
So it's
that.
just like going through your county, just how it was just stated. So you can go to Douglas County, Chelan County, and you can look up that for anybody, actually. Those websites.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Anything else on that question? All right, we'll move on to the next one then. When do I have to mail my ballot for it to count on November 3rd? And if I'm going to be out of state on November 3rd, can I still fill out my ballot from another state? So let's answer the first part of that question first. How much time do I have for it to count on November 3rd?
So it has to be in. It has to be in on November 3rd. Most of the drop boxes has to be in by 8 p.m. So it can't be marked for November 3rd. It has to be sent prior. And I'm pretty positive that you can communicate wherever you're sending that from, how long it would take for your letter to be received, or your ballot to be received with whoever you decide to mail that through.
What are the benefits of turning my ballot in a little early? Is there a reason to do that?
Oh, certainly, especially this year. So just touching up on what Bella had mentioned previously, this year in particular, with all the work that is being done to go ahead and limit the amount of voters, it is especially important as soon as you go ahead and get your ballot, fill it out immediately and send it in the mail. If for some reason, or even if you are driving by your drop box, like Isabella went ahead and mentioned, drop it off immediately. There will be some of us are working on some options for those individuals that do tend to procrastinate. So we can go ahead and drive them to the ballot box as well. But for those folks that are able to go and send it through mail, it is free postage, it is free paid for. So that shouldn't be a barrier for anyone. But just make sure you do it in enough time so that it gets there and it is counted.
Great. Anyone else on the first part of that question? Okay, so now another good question. So if I'm going to be out of state on November 3rd, can I still fill out my ballot from another state?
Yes, you can. You can use what's called an absentee ballot to do that. And you can request an absentee ballot up until October 26th. And there is a online link to do that I will also drop in the chat box. It's www.vote.org/absentee ballot Washington. So if you are living out of state, essentially what you do is you just go onto that website and you type in your information and the address you want it to be sent to. By October 26th, they'll send it to you. You send it right back as soon as you get it. And it's essentially as simple as if you were mailing it from your home.
Wow. All right. Nice. Moving on to the next question. I do not trust mail-in voting. Is there somewhere I can drop my ballot off in person?
Yeah, I think Isabella mentioned that there's a lot of polling places where you can drop them off, and that changes per county. But usually, all the superior courts have a place where you can drop off your ballot.
You can also go to the library, and then here in East Wenatchee, there's the Douglas County building by the Loop Trail. You can also Google this to look at all of the ballot boxes for your county and find out those locations.
So what would someone specifically type in the Google bar if they were looking for a location like that in their county?
I would go to your county's website and just type in ballot boxes, and you should be able to locate those.
For the majority of a lot of the ballot boxes located around the region, the majority of them will be located near city halls. Wenatchee would have to be one of the exceptions because it is right next to Memorial Park. But for anybody living in the outskirts, in the smaller communities, the majority of them would be located near their city hall. So go ahead and keep an eye out for those. And I'm sure that those will become more visible as we progress through this election period.
All right. Any other thoughts on that? Dropping off the ballot in person? Seems like we covered all of that. Okay, so the next question. This one's a good one. So the information on the news seems to be pretty biased these days. Is there a public site where I can read and learn more about the candidates? So where do you all read about the candidates that you vote for?
Well, candidates should have their own personal websites to begin with there. There's also the voter pamphlet that you can go to. I also think understanding that some of us have certain groups of friends, and to almost make yourself uncomfortable to go outside of that to talk to different people. And the word biased, if you're just finding information about one party or one area, then it's going to be biased. So if you have to recognize that you need to know the unknown, and you have to reach out to find that information from another party. If you feel like the information that you are getting is biased, then you have to reach out to find the other part of the story or the other perspective than the one that you're getting.
Right. So find other people that are outside your typical friend group and social circle to discuss where they're getting their information and listen to their opinions. That's good. I like that. Alex, what do you think?
Additionally, I think it's really important to take note that we are all biased. There's no one without any biases, right? And so whether they're internal bias or anything, you have to acknowledge that you do have them, whether you have the privilege to ignore them or not, really understand them. But if you want to just go off of the facts, if you go on if you just Google the politician or the candidate, especially if they're being reelected, they have a record of every bill that they've presented, every bill that they've signed, and so you can do your research and find out not just that whether they match my skin tone or they speak my native language, but what they've actually voted on, right? And so I think voting informed is also just as important as voting, right? Because that's why people that are reelected are much more likely to be elected, or people with certain last names that match your ethnicity are more likely to be get your vote, right? So also, like, voting informed is just as important.
Right.
Well said.
Very well said. Steph, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, well, I'll also say that if a candidate is actively campaigning, they'll probably have a pretty robust social media presence too. So you can look to them on Instagram, Facebook, maybe even Twitter, and they'll have a lot of their policy positions or positions on social issues represented there. And that's generally a more accessible way to get a sense of who they are and what they believe in and where they're actually showing up. I think that a lot of the time when we look at candidates' websites, there's a lot of like jargon and big blocks of text that say like, this is what I support in theory and this is what I voted for. But on social media, you're able to see like what communities they're in and where they're putting their bodies and where they're putting their voices and their resources and who they're actually supporting on the ground. So if you are on the social medias, definitely leverage those to look up local candidates. I think this is true, especially of local candidates. It's really important to see if they're showing up in your local community.
Right. Donnie, anything to add?
No, I think everybody covered pretty much everything there. I would just go ahead and go back and piggyback on what Alex went ahead and mentioned. To go ahead and do your own research. Always make sure that it is from a reputable source. I will often go ahead and go to my county's election office website as well to go and pick up any information I have on there. But inform yourself and make sure that your values align with whomever you are choosing as you go ahead and prepare to vote. So.
Yes. And also there are a lot of websites like Ballotpedia, websites like that just list kind of who's running for what. It's very generic information, like what side they lean on, how many years they've held office, if any. But typically the one thing they have is they have every candidate running. And sometimes it'll even link you to a website which will link you to their social media and so on and so forth. So the information is out there. And I typically veer away from candidates who have little to no presence, whether it's on a website or social media. It just kind of makes me wonder if they have anything worth saying, if they're not saying anything at all. So yeah, okay, cool. That's a lot of information there. And then this one's really the kicker. I feel like we can have a really nice long conversation about this. And then we're going to go into the questions from our viewers. So thousands of people vote on election day. So why does mine matter?
I think right now with our current political state, it matters a lot. And I think it matters for the immigrant women who are getting forced into hysterectomies, the children in cages, the LGBTQIA plus community who is seen as unvalid, the people who don't have access to healthcare, Black people who are living in fear, who are trying to simply exist in this country. And if we want to bring it to even a local level, we can look at farm workers who are dying from COVID and working in very hazardous conditions. We can look at essential workers who aren't getting hazard pay in our community. We can look at the many people who are losing their jobs right now and are going hungry. We can look at the people whose unemployment are running out, the many businesses that have been shut down and had to close their doors, the students who are dealing with mental health issues with everything going on and having everything changed for them, the people who have lost their homes due to the fires that are taking place all around of our state. So I think there's so many reasons why you should vote and why it's important to use the privilege that you have to vote. And I think it's important to use that privilege to help the people who have been systematically marginalized in our community and those whose lives have been turned upside down by COVID and our current political state.
Yes, to all of that.
All of that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Donnie, what do you say? Why should I vote?
So, if anybody has had the opportunity, or if anybody has access to Amazon Prime, there's an amazing documentary on there called "All In: The Fight for Democracy." It has been out for a few weeks, I believe. I watched it recently. It is amazing. So actually, it covers the history of voting in the U.S. The barriers that people were facing. So this is women who have been voting, people Black or Black brothers and sisters. And then right now, within the last few years, like the voting suppression that is going on. So I think that is a beautiful documentary that clearly displays all the work that has come before us and everybody who has fought to go ahead and get their vote heard and to be heard through their vote. I think that if you have access to that, and I did go ahead and come across that documentary a couple of days ago on YouTube, so you might catch it every now and then again. But if you were to watch it, I implore that you do, and you understand that a lot of people have put a lot of work into getting to where we are today. So, and this has been years and years and decades of their own personal fight for their rights to vote. So for us to sit here and just not take part in it is selfish when we can go ahead and make a change. And right now, in recent years, there has been a lot of votes that have been, with just a few thousand, that have swayed one way or the other. So when it comes to people saying, like, I don't know that my vote will actually count, it actually comes down to small numbers. So I'm hoping that is what everybody keeps in mind as they go ahead and this voting season rolls around. It is very important.
Yeah. Alex, what do you have to say?
Well, like the thing that comes to mind is that the phrase, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. Because those voting and elections really determine which issues deserve our attention and which issues deserve to be heard and to be addressed, right? And which don't. And so you voting is you actually, and you abstaining from voting is actual position, is a position, and it is political, and it is extremely violent against certain communities, like Isabel said. And so really acknowledging that if we don't vote because we don't like who the options are, or it's like a political protest, you are that is more violence on marginalized community, right? And so just really appreciating that not voting is also really, really political and really violent.
I've never heard it put that way before, but I really appreciate that input. That's good answer. That hits hard.
Can I piggyback that real quick?
Yeah.
I just think that Alex is exactly right, and I really want to echo and amplify that concept that not voting is a really privileged position to have, because if you're able to be in a position where it won't matter if Donald Trump or Biden is elected, then you're not being impacted by the policy change that's going to occur based on who is elected, and that's not about you, it's about all of those people who will be affected. These policies are going to be, as Alex and Bella both said, enacting violence against people. And if you're in a position where you're apathetic about that, that means that you're not going to be one of the people against whom violence will be enacted. But again, you have a responsibility to protect those people. In that same vein, about small numbers mattering that Donnie mentioned, a lot of people, I think, here in Washington think it doesn't really matter if they vote because of the Electoral College, and Washington will go for Biden. It's blue, like Seattle, we've got them. But down the ballot, your vote really, really matters. To give an example of this, in Adrian's election versus Keith Gaynor, he's the Republican incumbent running against her, we have really small margins. Every single vote matters. In fact, if every 18 to 40-year-old came out to vote in this election, this district, 12th legislative district, would be blue. But it's not, just because that contingent of people doesn't turn out. It's not even about persuading people. It's just if all of those people came out and voted. So if you're considering whether your vote is going to make an impact, maybe it won't on the national level, but it really, really will close to home. And close to home is where the policies matter.
Right. Good stuff there. I have a couple of other questions to ask before we get into the live questions. And this one's a little tricky. What about those who are considering voting, who never have before, but are convicted felons? can convicted felons vote? I've had this discussion with a lot of people who are convicted felons that believe they no longer have that right. And then they need to clear their name. But I've also heard on the other side of things that that's not necessarily true. Do we have any information on that?
Didn't we just have a court case with this specific issue in the Washington State Supreme Court? I forget off the top of my head, but I think we just recently had a deciding court decision that addressed this issue. Does anyone know anything about that?
I read something recently that said your right to vote is only taken away when you are in custody. And or under, they didn't say in custody, but it was either in custody or under some kind of not probation, but like maybe house arrest or something like that. I don't know all of the information on it, but maybe between the five of us, we have some information. But I think the main point of this question is to address that if you are a felon and you think you can't vote, that is hearsay and that is a myth, and there is far more information on that. Do we know where we can find that information? Probably the same place where we find any information on voting.
Yeah, I've got the link right here, and I will drop it in the chat. I'm link woman. But exactly as you said, Kenzie, you're spot on. As soon as you are no longer under the authority of the prison or in some sort of probation, like under the authority of some custody officer, then your right to vote is automatically restored.
Okay, then. All right. That's good to know, because I find having a lot of conversations with people who don't vote, and one of their biggest reasons is I'm a felon. I can't. So that's really good to know. On piggybacking off of that question, and this might be kind of a good follow-up for those that are viewing, how do you all talk to people who don't vote? How does that conversation go for you? Like, do you try, does it turn into an argument? Do you try to persuade them? How does it go?
I think for me, the most efficient way of getting people to vote or involving them in movements is usually seeing what's on fire in their lives, because no one is in under all of our systems, the systems that we live or we navigate, no one is at the bottom all the time, right? And I think that's how certain systems are maintained. And so, but usually, unless they're the 1%, they are affected by something, and they have something that are something they're passionate about. And I think there's a stereotype of just young people not caring and being apathetic and just and I don't think that's necessarily true, because I think we are really passionate people. And I think we care about things like student loans and the environment. And the 1960s will show us that young people really can have a lot of change, right? And so I lost my train of thought. But yeah.
I think that's a really good start. The point of a conversation is trying to meet someone with where they're at and understand why they choose to not vote, and then kind of segue off of that. Anyone else thoughts on that?
I could piggyback off of that. I think it's understanding, their perspective. And I normally am a person who asks a lot of questions before I say anything. If I can better help somebody, if I know what they're looking for and what's going on with them. So I think asking questions before you just assume or assert yourself or your opinion is almost, in my personal life, was the best way of going about it, is asking questions of them, understanding where they're at, understanding their perspective, because sometimes some people don't even understand their own perspective, and they've experienced certain things, but sometimes they don't always grasp, this experience was racist or sexist, until someone brings it to them and they start asking questions about that experience. And then you start talking about it and educating on it. And they're like, oh, well, maybe I should vote. now because that's important to me from something that I've experienced. So I think asking questions is one of the most vital things in that discussion.
Right. And it opens the floor for more of a discussion and less of an argument, because the premise of the conversation is you should vote, and when it gets accusatory, automatically it deflects that person's intent. They don't want to hear anything you have to say. So I think that's really good. That's good, because I'm trying to figure out how to talk to some of my friends that choose not to vote. Anyone else on that one before we dip into some of the live questions? I know we've got one here.
I think I'll just go ahead and say that maybe not everybody who is not voting is not doing it by choice, but maybe because it seems overwhelming. Earlier this year in the primaries, I had somebody very similar to my age who is fluent in English and perfectly mentally healthy, but they've just never done it because when they see the ballot and they come with like the inner envelope that you put your ballot in and everything, it just seems so complex. So they said, well, I would be glad to go ahead and vote, but maybe you can just walk me through the process and where do I drop it off and all that. And all it was a simple exchange of like, it's actually so simple. You don't even have to spend money on the postage. And just walking through those simple processes. Now, like you've all mentioned, there are some folks that have major issues with the whole process or are totally leaning on one side or the other. But there are also those individuals that just see it as very complex because of that, or too time consuming to do their research. But when you explain, how it's so beneficial, it might get them on a different frame of thinking.
Right. Right. Well, so the live question that we have, at least that I have here on the Zoom chat, kind of follows up on that. It's from Susan McDonald. Thanks for submitting a question. She says, I have found that young people often don't like the candidates who are running, especially if their candidate that they did vote for didn't make it to the runoff. So they do not feel the need to vote. Have you seen this problem?
I would say I'm kind of in that younger population. And for me, I have ran into people who don't like any of the candidates, but I feel like definitely in my generation right now, a lot of the issues are definitely hitting home with a lot of us in many, many, many different ways. And so we are going to be involved. And I think I'm hoping, and the people that I've communicated with, that we come out in numbers as this younger generation. And I think that we have definitely been at a forefront with a lot of the situations going on right now in the current state, that I think a lot of us are educated and have been reaching out for information and trying to figure out what to do, how to vote, why it's important. I have conversations daily with people about politics and voting and the situations happening all across our country. That's pretty much all of my social medias. And that is my own echo chamber as well. But I do have people outside of that I communicate with. And I think that a lot of my generation is going to vote for who we feel is going to help with a lot of the emotions that we are feeling currently about certain situations.
Anyone else? Alex, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I think when the question of just like, what if I don't like the two people or the limited number of people that are on the ballot, I think kind of ignores like local elections and change that can happen at a more community-based level.
Yes.
Also, in addition, I think that question provides the lens of like with a sense of frustration. How do I vote for something that for someone that who may not match ideally all of my values, kind of like doesn't really allow for like anything else, right? So like if that's not your person with all of your issues that matter to you, like vote, but also get involved, right? There's much more that you can do. Like voting is the floor, not the ceiling. And so I like that helps when have conversations like that with people that don't like match all of their don't share all the ideals with their candidates, right? get involved and do more.
Right. Right. And I can understand also the deferent, especially in like those larger elections, those federal elections. It can kind of seem like your voice is so small in a spectrum that's so big, where I can relate to that feeling. What's the point? But definitely in those smaller elections, it really, really does matter. Donnie, do you have anything to add to that one in particular?
So I'll just go ahead and follow up on what's already been voiced. So just based off of the current situation that we're in, I am not at all happy with the division of our communities. I am not at all happy with the bigotry, the hatred that is coming out from the highest position in our land. And it is because of that I am going to make sure that I am well informed, and I am, like Alex went ahead and mentioned, I am going to work to elevate our local elected officials and make sure that they are put into positions of power that'll go ahead and carry our voice locally up into the state, and then from there nationally. Is what I would go ahead and say, and that is what is empowering me right now. I am one of those that, like Bella went ahead and mentioned, my ideal candidates did not make it forward, but there are other candidates that that share values that I value as well. So I will be looking to them, and I will be making sure that they are also working for not only for me, but for all the communities that I go ahead and live around and serve.
And if I could add, I don't think that there's ever a perfect candidate for anybody. There's never going to be one. So no matter what, you're going to compromise per se with that person that holds closest to your values of what you're expecting out of a government, whether that be local or federal.
All right. We got another question. This is from Madeline. She says, all right, do you think mail-in only will show higher turnout rates? Previously, with elections, it can be difficult to make it to the polls, find your poll, etc., given work or other responsibilities, which often barred certain groups from voting. So do you think mail-in will aid in those issues where people haven't been able to vote?
Washington State has actually been using mail ballots since 1983, and I got this information on the Secretary of State website. So for Washington State, it's not anything that is new to mail in your ballots. For other states, it's definitely different, but I think that's a different conversation as well.
Right. We're definitely lucky we have mail-in, especially in light of the pandemic. I'm very, very grateful to be living in Washington State for that reason.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, we're capable of speculating about how mail-in will affect the turnout nationwide, but I also think we shouldn't have a false level of confidence just because of the recent attacks on the United States Postal Service. So don't not vote because you think that everybody else is going to turn out to vote and your vote will matter less. It's a crapshoot, folks.
Right.
And it's possible that people will have more opportunity. It's also possible that that there will be some interruption to that, and we want to get our votes in early and definitely get them in at all to ensure that we can make this as streamlined as possible.
Yes, all the reason to turn in your ballots early.
And I think it's important to understand that there's a reason that voting's getting barred for, there's a reason the current presidency is trying to stop voting by mail. There's a reason for it. I think that's important to recognize and understand across the nation that this might be a bigger turnout. There's differences. And I think voting by mail probably makes it a lot easier for people than to go to the ballot places to stand in line for hours. So again, just make sure you recognize that there's a reason for sure.
Yeah, probably also a good reason to recognize that voter suppression is real and pretty much always has been. And there are hidden forms of it, subtle and not so subtle, everywhere. It's good to be aware of them. So, do we have any questions on the Facebook video? Do we know? Steph, were you able to see any of that?
You know what? I can try to check.
All right, I put you on the spot. We're all out of questions for the Q&A on the Zoom, unless anyone else has anything that they'd like to add or anything they'd like to ask.
Yeah, I say we close it up. Give people
All right.
some time to have a more substantial closing remarks section than we imagined. I don't know if you guys have a message to share with the community, but here's your platform.
Yeah, I would definitely just say, like, for anyone watching that knows me and you have questions on voting, please reach out and I'd love to help out. Same goes to say with anyone watching that knows these lovely individuals. And yeah, thank you all for watching and participating. I'm going to give a quick shout out to ypncw.com. That's Young Professionals North Central Washington. They have a lot of events and other things going on their website. Again, that's ypncw.com. If you're interested in any events having to do with young professionals, voting, civic rights, all that good stuff. Yeah, and I would also say get out to vote. It's important, and your community is relying on you to use your voice, and that's a right that has been fought for and people have died for. And you deserve to use it, and so do people that are in less privileged shoes. So, thank you for watching.
Thank you so much, Kenzie. Thank you so much to our moderator, Kenzie, and to each of our panelists this evening. We so appreciate your time and hearing your perspectives. If you'd like more information about NCW Young Voters or the Young Professionals of NCW, please find them on Facebook. For more information about NCW Libraries, upcoming events and resources, please visit us at www.ncwlibraries.org and find us on Facebook as well. And I just want to thank everyone and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for voting.